Mic check, 1 2 1 2.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Hey, you're listening to this edition of the Business Side of Music. In the studio today, Michael Beinhorn. You know, I started to read this guy's bio and I realized he's done just about everything that could be done. Kind of leave it at that. But I a little bit, you received a Grammy nomination for Producer of the Year for your work on Celebrity Skin by the group Hole, along with Mechanical Animals by Marilyn Manson. That year, you became the only producer in history to have 2 recordings to enter the Billboard album charts top 10 in the same week, which to me is a feat in itself. Michael has since produced the albums of such artists as Korn, Marilyn Manson, Soundgarden, Soul Asylum, Red Hot Chili Peppers. We mentioned Hole, Raging Slab, one of my favorites, Ozzy Osbourne, Mew, Social Distortion, the Golden Palominos, and the rockers that just won't go away, Aerosmith. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you. You got started in this business. This is a question we typically ask our guests. How did you get started in this business?
Well, I bought a synthesizer when I was about 14 with money that I'd earned from a summer job. That's pretty much how it got started.
What kind of synthesizer was that?
It was a Micro Moog, which was, I think it was about the littlest, tiniest synthesizer by a major brand you could get. And
yep, I had one of those that sat right on top of my Hohner D6 clavinet.
You've got a Hohner D6?
I did at one time, yeah.
Oh, God, what a great instrument that is. It's one of my favorites. I love that thing. But yeah, I mean, soon I became the only kid in the area who had a synthesizer, and I started playing in bands. Somehow I ran into a bunch of people in Manhattan, because I was out in Queens, and we formed a band called Material. And from there, we wound up producing other people, and that kind of culminated in us producing a record with Herbie Hancock in 1983.
Oh my gosh, one of my favorites. Which album was that?
Yeah, it's called Future Shock, and it had a song on it called Rocket.
Absolutely. Great album. Man,
Thank you.
You touched a nerve with that one. Love that project.
Good.
So where'd you go from there? I mean, because you've got it's a deep pool of acts that you've worked with here. How did that come about? A lot of these bands do travel in the same circles, but at the same time, there's a lot of competition out there to work with these acts. How did you wind up with them?
I guess I personally can ascribe a lot of what's happened to me as appearing to be kismet. The thing with Herbie was really interesting because he was literally at the end of his deal with Columbia, which is now Sony, of course. I think he was persona non grata at that point, so he really had very little to lose in terms of what he was going to do next, because he was literally going to be a man without a record label pretty soon. So,
which is hard to believe, because what a legend.
Well, after that kind of cemented his deal and I guess his future pretty much, because that became his most successful record ever. Everything else over time, I always felt like each project kind of laid another step or another chunk in the pathway leading me forward. So this would lead to this, that would lead to that. And it's a very interesting path from Herbie's record to, let's say, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. From my perspective, it made perfect sense.
And so then you move on from Herbie, which is kind of that funk, jazz, soul, rock fusion, and you move into a world that is really about as far apart from that as you can get, start working with groups like Soundgarden, Korn, Ozzy, first of all of those are pretty heavyweight acts in a totally different genre.
They are. But like I said, I always felt that there was a singular kind of through line with all of them. And that is, it goes beyond genre, and it really pertains more to the expressive quality of the music that these artists are making. And that's something that I could always relate to. There was something compelling about each one of them. I mean, Herbie was kind of different because he had such an illustrious career at that point that it was like, on the one hand, there was so much to work with, and on the other hand, it was a completely blank canvas. And we'd been given the keys to this car.
Oh my gosh!
And, basically said, take it, turn it, customize it, and drive it wherever you want. So it was like, oh my God, this is like, you're like a kid in a candy store.
That's every producer's dream.
It was, basically being told, okay, this artist, in no uncertain terms, has very little to lose, so write 2 songs for this record. Just whatever you want, and let's see how it goes. And of course that resulted in us writing the whole record. But it was amazing. It just felt like we'd been blessed with something beyond anything that we could have ever imagined.
Growing up as a kid, what style of music do you listen to? Did you have particular artists that you enjoyed, or was there what influenced you musically?
Well, I grew up in a Beatles classical music household with a tiny bit of jazz thrown in. I was open to all kinds of stuff. When I was little, I heard switched on Bach, which kind of changed my life and introduced me to synthesizers. And then when I was about 13, I just started getting into stuff that was a little bit more off the beaten track, proggy stuff. I bought Brian Eno's first solo record when I was 14. And having no reference point for that whatsoever, not knowing any of his work in Roxy Music, it damaged me irreparably. And it took me down a pathway that I've been thankful for up until this very moment. It just, it led me on this voyage of discovery that was just phenomenal.
How was it to work with Red Hot Chili Peppers? I know some folks that have worked with Ozzy and Korn, but Red Hot Chili Peppers, one of my favorite acts, obviously, in my opinion, creative geniuses. What's that like in the studio with them?
I guess there's 2 ways to answer that question. One would be dealing with the Chili Peppers in the best of circumstances, and the other would be dealing with trying to get the Chili Peppers to that best of circumstances type plateau, which was my initial task when I began working with them because they were in such bad shape at that point.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it was a very difficult project. The first one, actually both of them were very, very difficult records to make, because there were so many personal issues with the band. It was, once we got to a level with them where they were really able to come into their own, so to speak, it was so exciting. It was so exciting to see it all come together. And I'd invested a tremendous amount of myself into that process. And to watch it come to fruition was personally as well as artistically rewarding for me.
And what about Ozzy? Kind of maybe a little different direction.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot different. I think Ozzy doesn't really enjoy being in recording studios very much.
That's interesting to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't an easy record to make. It was because a lot of the material was there, but not all the material. So I had to spend a lot of time accumulating songs from different places for him, and it was tough. It was definitely a tough record to make, but in the end, it seems like it worked out well for him. We're
going to take a little break, get a word in here for our sponsors. When we get back, though, I want to start off with the book you wrote in 2015 called Unlocking Creativity. It outlines your personal experience along with the creative process as a record producer. So I want to touch base on that when we get back. All right, we're in the studio here today with Michael Beinhorn.
Hi.
I'm just thrilled with the acts that you worked with. This is really amazing. A lot of great stories yet to hear from him.
Hey guys, this is Danny Myrick, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, this is Vinny Ribas, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag.com. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hey, we're back in the studio. We have Michael Beinhorn here with us today. Consummate producer, as I mentioned in the beginning of the shows, worked with such acts as Marilyn Manson, Soundgarden, Aerosmith, Red Hot Chili Peppers. So we're going to talk about this book you've written called Unlocking Creativity. It's published by Hal Leonard. I started to do some reading on it. First of all, the table of contents in itself, that really talks about a journey. And when we discuss about, the record producer, and I think you've shared just a little bit about this, when you go in to produce a project for an act, you really are giving your mind, your heart, and your soul to get this project developed. You're really kind of creating a baby of sorts, and your job as the producer is to keep the band or the artist on track, get them pointed in the right direction. And as I start looking at some of your chapters, you put a lot of work into this. What was the inspiration? What was the momentum to get this going?
Well, I kind of took a step back because I started thinking about all the sort of protocols and things that I guess became part of just sort of innately became part of my process over the years. And I realized that this kind of information wasn't readily available to a lot of people. And I just started writing stuff down, like stuff that I did, ways that I would prepare to work, and that kind of, everything sort of extrapolated there and kind of went into, and it really became more of a philosophical thing than sort of like a technical or formulaic thing. Like, what's a basic philosophy around music production, which of course is very personal because the philosophy comes down to the individual. I figured if I write something like this out that's non-technical but concerns other things, the driver behind being a record producer, that could be incredibly inspiring for other people who are looking to do the same thing but may not necessarily be as tapped in.
Some of the things just, are so fundamental. Like you have a chapter on the contract. You have a chapter on what is artist development. I mean, these are really things that you have to get started before you get into the rest of the process. I would think even before pre-production.
I found that with artists who are signed and who have some, track record, the development aspect of it and the pre-production aspect kind of go hand in hand. Because the artist develops in the pre-production phase as he's given critique, and challenges to the work that he's presented. How are we going to make this better? What he gets from that process is the ability to be able to look at his own work from a completely different perspective, as I'm sure as you know, based on what songwriting and record making is like. That's incredibly hard. It's impossible, actually, for an artist to find on their own. You some degree of objectivity.
You have to almost step out of your body to really kind of get that different perspective that you normally don't. It's kind of like when you hear your voice for the first time, you go, whoa, wait a minute, that's me? Well, musically, it's the same way. You have to step out and look at it from another dimension.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an ability that I would say virtually no artist has to the extent where they can use it on a regular basis constructively. Which is one reason why I think a record producer is still going to have a job, because they can provide that function for an artist. So when an artist actually has that ability, has been given that ability to look at their music from a completely different perspective, it does change them. And if that's done on a regular basis, it gives they basically wind up with a skill set that they never had before. Is it something that they can employ all the time 100%? No, absolutely not. They'll still need input, and they'll still need assistance, but they'll also recognize that they need it. They'll also recognize what good input is like as well, and that's so important because I find so many people now don't even do pre-production on their records anymore and just waltz right into a studio thinking that they're ready to record when they're not.
And so my question to you regarding that's probably not a smart move.
I'm not going to find a different adjective.
I mean, it's like taking a test. You have to study for the test. You've got to do your and doing cliff notes is not going to get you the grade on your test. It's the same thing when you go in the studio to record. You've got to have all your ducks in a row. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all you have to stay within the lines all the time, I would think, but at least you've got to have some kind of a map to know where you're going.
Yeah, you do have to have some kind of map, and it's absolutely astounding to find that in this day and age, so many artists don't even know what pre-production is, and so many more don't incorporate it. You know, part of the reason is that record making has become very time sensitive now, and people feel, well, we don't have to spend. You know, we don't have a lot of money to spend, we don't have a lot of time to spend, so let's pare away all the bits and pieces that appear extraneous. Oops, this is going to take too long, it's going to waste my time, let's get rid of it, you know? But, you know, that doesn't help the artist in the long run at all, and it certainly it causes them to stagnate.
I also think, you know, and we had this conversation on another podcast recently, back in the days, you know, we would spend, 6 months in the studio recording, and finding the right songs, finding the right singles, and then getting it out there and working them. But you're right, nobody's taking that kind of time anymore. And when I say 6 months, it could have been up to a year and a half. We're not spending that time. It's almost like we're trying to get content out there as quick as we can. And I think we're losing quality and replacing it with quantity.
You hit the nail on the head. That's absolutely what's happening, and it really has more to do with this fear that people in the music industry have that they're not going to make a fast enough impact, so they have to just inundate the market. They have to literally flood it with content. It doesn't matter what the qualitative aspect is at all. It just matters that it's there, and they're just throwing it. They're just lobbing it out because they think that the newness of something is what kind of validates it more than the quality. There's a great logical fallacy called post hoc ergo melius hoc, which means after this, better than this. You know, which I think kind of exemplifies how the music industry thinks. They think, because it's new, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
instead of if you infuse something with quality, and you really put a lot of effort in it, it stands a greater chance of making a greater impact with people.
I go back to the classic rock days, probably right after the Beatles. When groups like Grand Funk Railroad or Santana or Chicago, Chicago every album was a double album, and it was great music because they had this creative freedom in the studio. And to me, that music, even though it's my generation, it's not the youth generation or the millennial generation out there, it's still timeless music. I can still listen to Santana's Abraxas album and hear things. I mean, that album's been out, 40 some odd years. I can still hear things there that I never noticed before because of the time that was put into it to make it.
Yeah. And there's an aspect of that I think is actually very sad, because what happened over the course of time in Western music is that the style of symphonic music, or chamber music, or whatever you want to call it, it kept evolving. It evolved from the Renaissance period to the Baroque period, and then you had a guy like Bach who stepped the game up.
Yeah, exactly.
And from him, you had guys like Mozart who came along who just completely turned it into something new, and then Beethoven, and then the Romantic period and the Impressionists. Every stage, you'd have these new people coming along who just changed the language completely. And what happened is that you forgot about the people who were behind these individuals for long. Bach was forgotten for 200 years.
Exactly.
Which is staggering to consider now. But like the fact that we can even talk about these artists from the 70s or the Beatles is kind of sad, because no one's really stepped up and been able to best them. And that's a problem. That's a real problem.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have just spoke volumes in that one statement. And it's not so much, a one-up as, it's almost like the creative juices have kind of compressed themselves or stifled, once again, just to get content instead of getting quality out there.
Well, yeah, exactly. And one of the issues, I think, is that there's been so much pressure from the music industry on artists to conform to a specific type of, to a stereotypical version of what an artist is and what an artist does, and to create music that is kind of like represents all this, it contains all the superficial elements of what successful popular music sounds like now, but has very little to none of the expressive component of music that's come before, which is why, for example, you're going to respond to these old records particularly. I mean, they're great anyway, but they're even more significant, and a lot of kids now listen to that stuff as well, because there isn't anything that people are making right now that has that same kind of expressive, communicative component.
It's not challenging the listener.
It's not challenging the listener, but it's also not speaking to the listener. It's not talking to them. It's not trying to engage with them, and trying to pull them in. Like the music that you're talking about, it engaged with you, and it had an emotion. People were trying to say something to you, to give you something, to share.
We're going to take another little break and get word in for another sponsor here, and then we're going to dig some more into the book here with Michael Beinhorn that he has written called Unlocking Creativity. It's published by Hal Leonard. I've started reading it, and I will tell you, it is a deep read, but when I say that, it's a good read because it causes you to think, and I believe that's something we all need to do more of these days. Anyway, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Wow, I just joined the Music Starts Here community. This is a truly hidden gem for anyone in the music business. Whether you live in Nashville or anywhere else in the world, Music Starts Here is like a GPS for your music career. This is the place to be if you want to get advice and direction from some seriously talented musical people who have been where you want to go. Music news, events, and a great big community with resources for artists, songwriters, musicians, studio and tech, along with music business advice from pros in the industry, all on one site. Make sure you get your free profile now. Go to www.musicstartshere.org. That's musicstartshere.org.
You're listening to the business side of music.
We're back in the studio. Michael Beinhorn, record producer for such acts as Aerosmith, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Korn, Marilyn Manson, Ozzy Osbourne, Social Distortion. You could just go on for days. Has written a book called Unlocking Creativity. One of the things we've been talking about is I go through this book and looking at some different things. One chapter I haven't gotten to yet, and I'm getting ready to. And I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of skipping around and then I'm coming back. Two things. Artist manipulation. Let's talk about that for a second. I mean, what exactly does that mean?
A lot of people in this position tend to, for lack of a better word, manipulate or try and manipulate the people they're working with to get the kind of results that they want. And
is that healthy?
I don't think it's healthy at all. I mean, I've been in a position where I've had to be very insistent about certain things that I felt was for the help, the greater good, of the recording I was working on. But as far as manipulating an artist, it's disagreeable.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, my feeling is what you want to hear from the artist at the end of the day is what they do. Not what I as the producer do. I mean, I'm trying to be transparent through this whole thing. To the greatest degree that I can, while still trying to have a good time.
Right.
And, but if if I'm trying to manipulate someone to get what I want out of them, ultimately the voice that's heard can't really be theirs. It's more mine, and I feel that I'm doing a disservice to the artist and the listener at that point.
I think that's some sage advice that a lot of producers should take. I know back in, I want to say in the mid to late 90s, we were cranking out artists at the record label, and we called them hat acts. And basically what it was is we had a hat, and you'd slide the artist under the hat, and as long as the artist fit the hat, it was good. But as soon as they stopped fitting the hat, you get rid of the artist and get another. So they were hat acts, and what it was is we were always trying to emulate or imitate or insert whatever word you want there, whatever the latest flavor of the day was when it came to a successful artist. And I think we bypassed a lot of really great talent that may not have been top 40 hit radio, but kind of gets you back to those albums that takes you on that musical journey.
Yeah, and yeah, that is what we were talking about earlier. And it's interesting because there was a certain point in the music industry, and I'm sure you recall it, when everyone thought they were able to print money.
Yeah.
There was just everyone was doing so incredibly well, and you kind of couldn't lose in a lot of ways, and we all thought that we were super geniuses, and a lot of us missed what was really going on. Like, I think it really also comes down to forgetting what the essence of the product actually is. What is this thing that we're trying to sell? Is it shoes? Is this something that can be fabricated, on a last repeatedly over and over again, so you get the same result every time, the same kind of quality, and you can predict exactly what's going to happen with it? No, absolutely not. This is very risk-oriented. It's infused with risk, as it should be. Talent, you can't predict. You can't predict what talent's going to do. You just got to roll with it and hope to God, And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. But it's become this very unrewarding, unforgiving type endeavor now, which is kind of silly.
We were at a time, I remember, especially in the studio, when I was doing artist development and A&R, that there would be that spark, there would be that magical moment, and you wanted to hold on to that as long as you could, because you knew you were going somewhere with it. You were creating something.
Yeah.
And I think not only artists, but I think songwriters and producers, anybody that's in front of a microphone being recorded, needs to seek out that special moment to fill that magical spark.
Absolutely. I can't agree more.
Yeah. So what's next for Michael here?
Well, I have gone down a slightly different road now. I've got a farm. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, that's okay, man.
Oh.
Chickens, they'll make you eggs. That's good.
Everyone's got to eat.
That's right.
One of the things that we're talking about, actually a couple of the things that we're talking about, pre-production, for example, these are things that I am seeing less and less people doing, but it's something that I feel is highly lacking from people's recordings, and I am essentially offering that to artists at every level because I think they need it.
I was going to ask you that. This is a service that you need to learn.
Absolutely. The same with artist development. I think people need to get outside input from other individuals who have experience with this and will be able to give them assistance, positive and detailed assistance, not just like a couple of flippant paragraphs about, hey, your song's great, yeah, you should record it, it's good, I'd buy it, hey.
Yeah. And not get that information from your mom or your dad or your aunts or uncles.
Yeah, to have someone who will say, this is not working, this piece of music is not working, and these are the reasons why it's not working. In bar this, beat that, in this section here, boom, this bass drum hit is not supporting the vocal, and so on and so on. You need this as an artist. People need this kind of stuff. They need to be able to find how they can present their ideas so that there's nothing in a song arrangement, let's say, that obscures the artist's expression, their idea, what they're trying to communicate. And this is very important stuff. So this is my new work.
I think it's amazing. One of the things I was going to say is there needs to be someone out there to teach the next generation of songwriters and artists, musicians and producers and engineers, because folks like you who have such a deep pool of knowledge and history and experience, that's got to get passed on somehow, because otherwise it's kind of like the blacksmith. We don't really think we need blacksmiths anymore, but they're still out there and we do need them for certain things. But if we lose these arts, if we lose these crafts, if we lose these skills, there's really no way to go back and get it.
Oh, you're at sea. You're absolutely at sea. I mean, what you're talking about is almost like a medieval trade guild or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you'd have where a master creator, who had a craft of some sort, would have apprentices, and he'd train them, and they'd basically go through different levels of training, and it's so true. It's so true. All of it has to be passed along.
So let me ask you, how can people find you?
I got a website. It's simple, michaelbeinhorn.com.
and that's
Couldn't be more simple than that.
BEINHORN, michaelbeinhorn.com.
That's the one.
And then how can they find your book?
I guess on Amazon through Hal Leonard. I think those are the two best.
You're out there to help that aspiring next generation of producer, right? Producers,
artists, songwriters, yes, absolutely. They need it. Everybody needs this.
Very good. Michael, thank you for your time. This has been great. We're going to get you back on because we had a lot more to talk about down the road.
Be a pleasure. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, don't forget to check out our affiliates, including Lab Canna, fine hemp products since 2014. Click on their link on our website for more information and how to order their product line. Also, don't forget to check out our other affiliate, Music Starts Here. You can find them at www.musicstartshere.org. Probably the best one-stop shop for the singer, songwriter, or aspiring musician who is relocating to Nashville or wants to. Also, shameless plug for the business side of music. Become a YouTube subscriber. Check out our website at www.businesssideofmusic.com. Follow us on Facebook at the Business Side of Music Podcast, or on Twitter at Business Side of Music Podcast.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Traci Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.